In Florida's high heat and southern comfort, a family hid the kind of secret that doesn't just rip marriages apart, it buries people alive. The sun poured down over their gated home like it always did, bright and unforgiving, like the truth they tried to hide. From the outside, their life looked perfect. A white painted mansion tucked behind trimmed palm trees, designer strollers quietly parked by the sandstone steps, a blacked out SUV polished to shine like a mirror of success. And inside, Bates smiled for the cameras, balancing life as a new mom and the polished, rebellious daughter of a construction tycoon. Her husband, Andre, with his chiseled accent and foreign charm, fit just well enough into the picture. Moldovan-born, tall, slightly rough around the edges, Andre was the kind of man who raised suspicion at the country club but not enough to say anything out loud. He spoke English with careful effort and kissed Bates' father hello at dinners with slightly too much tension in the jaw. Still, he was working hard, proving himself, as Bate liked to say, helping out at her father's company, learning the American dream one invoice at a time. Together, holding their baby daughter, they looked like the happily ever after fairytale TLC always promised. But television doesn't show silence after the arguments. It doesn't show passwords changed, or transactions deleted, or hollow smiles for Instagram posted after another night of slamming doors. At brunch, Bates' champagne always sparkled, her nails always matched, and her voice never cracked in public. Her mother called her a lion cub in designer fur, and her father, he only kept the peace because Bate was all he had. His empire, built brick by brick over 30 years, was meant to be hers, but only if she married someone dependable. Andre had passed their tests on paper. Clean record, devoted, willing to work under the family firm, but trust was still conditional, especially from Darren, Bates' older brother and financial director of the business. Darren saw him as a pet project, not a son-in-law. He kept records tight, eyes tighter. Still, things moved fast. Within a year, Andre was managing job sites. He drove one of the company trucks and signed off on small purchases. At Friday night dinners, even Bates' father occasionally clapped him on the back. But behind Bates' lipstick smiles was a growing storm. Family tension, whispers about company funds being accessed too freely, questions about accounts that didn't match and invoices that felt too clean. Bate played the role of the bridge, calming her husband, softening her tyrant father, nodding at Darren's passive-aggressive jabs. For a while, it all worked. Then they opened the books. Darren called the emergency meeting on a Sunday. Half the numbers on 4 major projects didn't line up. Checks had gone out to vendors no one remembered hiring. Small accounts in distant cities had received tens of thousands with no work to show. At first, they thought it was a system error. Then two, then four accounts traced back to deposits into a bank Andre used. 2.5 million. Gone. Money doesn't vanish like that. Not without prints, not without help. Bate was at home when it happened. Her daughter giggled from a playmat. Andre stood at the outdoor grill, beer in hand. When Darren stormed in holding the forensic accountant's report, Bate didn't even blink. She whispered first. "You think we stole it?" Silence. Andre looked up as Darren slapped the papers down. Bate reached for her baby. Andre didn't say a word. He didn't even ask how the money vanished. He didn't demand a search for whoever set them up. He simply stared at the reports with a calm that felt dangerously close to familiarity. That was the moment Darren decided. Someone in this house was a thief. And if they weren't careful, that perfect fairy tale would end where no one smiles, the courtroom. When trust snaps quietly in the open air, no one hears it. But its fallout speaks louder than any gunshot. What they didn't know, what no one sitting at that patio knew, was that this was just the beginning. Because federal eyes had already been watching them for weeks, and someone had tipped them off. This wasn't a break-in, or hacking, or outside fraud. This was going to be a war. Blood, optional, betrayal, guaranteed. He thought he married into money. She thought she married into freedom. Neither of them saw what was coming next. And you're not ready for what happens when all of that cash shows up somewhere no one ever expected. Not even God could write a check big enough to pay for what got uncovered next. He once crossed an ocean for love. Now his name is tangled in a crime report that reads like a movie script. There was a time when Andre woke up to the chill of cracked windows and the hum of power lines over crumbling block buildings in the outer quarter of Chisinau. Moldova was all he knew: dust, discipline, and a family name that didn't open doors, but held a quiet weight in his neighborhood. His father worked with his hands, his mother with her silence. Work was everything. Showing emotion was weakness. And dreams, those were luxury items. Andre wanted out. Not because he hated where he was, but because he wanted more. And when you grow up in a place where everything feels stained by history, every dollar looks like freedom. He didn't chase bait for her name. He chased her for the life she offered, laughter without caution, choices he never thought he'd have, and that sweet American accent that made life feel possible. Their online messages turned into phone calls. Those became late-night video chats. Then he stood in an airport, holding a suitcase packed with secondhand jeans, a tie too formal for customs, and the kind of hope people only carry once. He came to Florida not as a husband, but as a question mark to an old money family who never saw him as more than a guest. Bate loved him, but love didn't fill out tax returns. Her father watched Andre like he was waiting for cracks. Darren didn't speak around him, he measured, judged, calculated the risk. Still, Andre did what he had to, applied for every permit, went through every interview, sat through every smirk at dinner. He knew the rules. Work hard, keep your head down, prove your worth one thankless day at a time. What they didn't see, what they never wanted to see, was how sharp Andre was. Thoughtful, focused. Calculating, maybe, but never reckless. He saw what Bates' family had and thought, why not me? He took the long hours no one wanted, managed sites when Darren's friends canceled. He learned the budget system, sat in on meetings. He even picked up enough legal lingo to file simple contracts. That's when the control started to loosen. Bates' father began trusting his judgment. Her mother made space at the table for him. Darren still sucked his teeth when Andre walked in, but the paperwork spoke louder than bias. Then came the missing truck. Bates' father had an armored vehicle scheduled to collect contractor payroll from a bank his company used every month. Same time, same route, same two guards. Routine, but that morning, mid-December, unseasonably warm, the vehicle left the bank and never made it to the office. 3 hours later, the truck was found parked in an abandoned lot, driver unconscious, back hatch pried open. The vault empty. The bank confirmed the withdrawal took place on time. Records verified the check came from the firm's account. No forced access, no fake signature. So how did $360,000 in fresh payroll cash evaporate into Florida humidity? And why was Andre's truck, company issued, logo on the side, seen roughly 10 blocks away on traffic cam footage minutes after the armored vehicle pulled off? It looked like coincidence until you started linking it to the bigger loss. 2.5 million missing from digital accounts across 4 projects. Portfolios Bate had signed off on, jobs Andre had supervised, bank transfers that triangulated right around the city. And now, this armored vehicle case, filed separately just 2 weeks prior. The pieces were uncomfortably tight. Andre insisted it was nonsense. Is visiting a bank a crime? He said in his first interview, face stone cold, hands resting in his lap. I picked up uniforms for crew members next door. The bank had nothing to do with me. But security footage couldn't prove his errand. And the timing, too coincidental. And when investigators dug deeper, they found an intern from Bates' father's office who remembered someone telling her to order replacement checks for a vendor that didn't exist. That someone, her memory was hazy. But she knew the accent was Eastern European. Each puzzle piece twisted the knife. Keep listening, because what comes next will change the case forever. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about betrayal masked as devotion. A family that never saw it coming, and a man who was once the hero suddenly cast as the thief. And right now, no one knew where the real story ended or how far it had spread. From here on out, even the people closest to them started asking questions they never dared before. The courtroom was waiting, so was the press, and Bate, she was about to find out that when the trust breaks, love no longer protects you. It exposes you. No one expects a nursery to become an evidence locker. But when agents unzipped those bags, so did every illusion she thought was real. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday morning. Just 10:12 am. The baby had already been fed and was down for her morning nap. Andre was outside on the porch, working through payroll calls. Bate had just put on a face mask, scrolling through parenting forums, and texting her sister about a weekend spa retreat. The house sat silent, wrapped in privilege and pretense, until the knock, not a soft one, it was authoritative, rhythmic, void of patience. Andre raised his head before the second knock landed. Bate froze. A split second crawled between them. Eyes locked, something heavy filtered through the silence between them, invisible but felt deep in her stomach. By the time she opened the door, the daylight had shifted. Swarmed by 6 federal agents, badges in front, voices steady, movements methodical. One stepped forward and spoke what would be etched in her mind for the rest of her life. We have a warrant to search the premises in relation to an ongoing federal investigation involving financial fraud and the disappearance of company funds originating from the Pothest construction accounts. Bate blinked. The words landed like ice water across her skin. Involving who? We'll explain everything shortly. Please stay where you are. Then everything blurred, drawers opened, laptops unplugged, hard drives bagged and labeled. Andre's cufflinks taken from the nightstand. The baby's closet searched, hanger by hanger. Bates' hands shaking, her voice turning to a whisper, then rising to a shout. This is insane. This is our home, there's a baby here, what are you even looking for? No one answered. And then, down the hallway, an agent called out. Nursery, we've found something. Two agents pulled Bate aside gently but firmly as they passed. The baby stirred in the monitor behind her, cooing softly, unaware the world outside her crib was burning to ash. They kneeled below her crib, white wood with pink bows and soft plush toys. Three black duffel bags sealed tight sat neatly just inches from where their daughter laid her head every night. One agent lifted it, it was heavy. Another unzipped it wide open. Bundled stacks of cash. No bank straps, just stashed bills. Tens, 20s, 50s, some marked, others crisp and untouched. Bates' mouth opened, but nothing came out. Time stopped. The agent turned around, eyes focused. We're going to need both of you to come with us. Andre didn't say a word. He didn't protest, didn't shout. He merely stared at the bags like he'd already seen them 100 times. And in that moment, Bates screamed. It wasn't the volume that broke the room, it was the tone. That jagged, cracked sound of a woman, watching the life she built rip open, along a seam she didn't even stitch herself. Her father arrived within 20 minutes. Darren came 10 behind him. Bates' mother never got out of the car, she watched from the curb, one trembling hand pressed to her lips. Darren stood in the hallway, silent, watching the zip bags loaded into evidence cases. His sister, wide-eyed and hysterical, cuffed gently and led past him. Bates shouted over her shoulder, Tell them, Andre, tell them this isn't what it looks like. But Andre didn't look back. He stepped into the black SUV without so much as a flicker of confusion. Bates screamed again, louder now. This isn't fair, that's not mine, but the cuffs stayed on. The nursery sat empty, except for a crib that still rocked slightly from where the baby had rolled. One stuffed bear had fallen onto the floor. The sunlight, warm just an hour ago, now felt sharp and mean as it poured onto the nursery carpet. They took her, they took him, they took the story away, and in the silence that followed, her father finally spoke. She didn't even lock the nursery door. Retaliation. Set up, cover up, it could have been any of those. But no one could stop asking the one question blasting louder than any headline. Why was that much cash sitting under a baby crib if someone wasn't running? Get closer. Because what happens in the interrogation room will destroy everything they ever said in public. You think you've seen betrayal, you haven't seen what happens when love and loyalty meet real money. The paper trail didn't just lead to her doorstep, it ran straight through her hands. Bates sat under the interrogation room's harsh white light, her lips dry, her fingers nervously picking at the edge of the table. Across from her, two agents stared quietly, their silence louder than shouting. On the steel desk lay a stack of printed bank statements, account summaries, and transfer confirmations. Thousands upon thousands of dollars moved in a perfectly coordinated dance. But none of it made sense except it did, and that's what terrified her. It started with a single slip. A fake LLC registered under a name nearly identical to one of her father's subcontractors, but not quite. Instead of Fortline Concrete Solutions, LLC, the payments had been going to Fortline Concrete Solutions and Services, LLC. A one-word difference. Enough to fool digital payroll systems. Enough to steal clean. Almost $180,000 was routed into that shadow account over the course of 2 months. The IRS audit started as routine. A tax flag triggered by the inconsistencies in a payroll deduction. But when agents pulled ownership records, the LLC listed an email contact, one connected to a generic hosting server. When they traced that email further, the shock hit hard. It belonged to an encrypted folder in Bates' name. More LLCs began popping up. One linked to a landscaping company based in Texas. That file had a blurred digital signature, but matched the way Bates signed her Christmas cards. Another funneled payments for consulting services out of Belize, but the account was created using a secondary IP address tied to the family house's Wi-Fi. The connections weren't just suspicious, they were surgical. And in one terrifying moment, all the deflections Bate had screamed in the driveway started to melt, because the filings showed a pattern she had noticed, maybe even helped rewrite. Willingly. That part, not even she was sure about anymore. But then came the worst part. A junior finance analyst, 22 years old, first job out of college, was called in for routine inquiry on the missing funds. She looked nervous, eyes darting behind thick glass frames. She wasn't sure what she saw, but she remembered one thing. Bate, 2 months earlier, accessing her father's office during a family dinner. Everyone had gone to the patio. She had stayed behind. The girl walked in by accident, trying to find the bathroom, only to see Bate sitting behind her father's computer, typing fast. She didn't say anything at the time, didn't think much of it, just turned around and walked out. Until they found the bank authorizations signed under her father's name, but his digital token had not been used in weeks. Bates' reaction in court filings wasn't denial, it wasn't even shock. It was fatigue, exhaustion. Her attorneys fought back, insisting Bate had account access due to shared oversight, a vague phrasing meant to stretched out like a glove over fire. But the questions kept coming. Who set up those LLCs? Why were funds moved in chunks just under the fraud detection limit? Why were three companies based in states Bate had never done business in? A motion was filed to subpoena her cell records. The court approved. Within days, leaked texts began making the rounds in underground forums and anonymous tip folders. Andre, the numbers are too clean, someone will notice. Bate, then make them better. Andre, we should stop. Your brother's watching me closer. Bate, let him, I'm already too deep, keep swimming. The texts hit the news. Local reports blurred the names, but everyone already knew. Court of public opinion ignited. Some said she was framed, coached, coerced. Others said she was finally showing her true face. And yet, in private phone interviews with prison intake, Bate broke. I was tired, tired of being safe. Tired of being controlled by men who never asked what I wanted, only what I could do for them. Andre gave me everything the show promised: freedom, danger, and options. What she called options, the court called felonies. What she called complicated, the IRS called wire fraud. The investigation expanded. The timeline stretched back a full year. Surveillance photos, conference login entries, and silent cams placed Bate not as the wife swept into the storm, but as the eye of it. And yet, behind closed doors, she still claimed it wasn't that black and white. I didn't steal it. I guided it, she said once to her lawyer. The money was already being misused. I just trimmed the fat. But the courtroom didn't deal in metaphors or old wounds. It dealt in timelines, names, passwords. And one password, that broke everyone's defense, belonged to her father. They found her using it twice from her own phone, via remote login. Bate didn't offer an explanation. She didn't even try. She looked up from the courtroom table, made direct eye contact with Darren, who refused to blink. She smiled. And that smile said something more dangerous than guilt ever could. She wasn't scared. She was done pretending to be sorry. What comes next? You'll see how regrets go out the window when betrayal becomes the only power someone has left to hold on to. Bate wasn't done, and neither was Andre. They came in holding hands. Now they're holding daggers. The courtroom murmured like a hive before the bell. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras flickered in their holders just outside the glass doors. This wasn't just a fraud case anymore. It was a spectacle, a marriage on trial, a family dragged to the witness stand by the roots. And somewhere, the child they once shared still cried for her morning bottle, unaware her parents were about to shred each other in front of 12 strangers. Andre sat on the witness stand first, a gray suit, no tie, the outline of a man who used to chase the American dream but now looked like he didn't want to dream at all. Hands folded in his lap, eyebrows drawn low. His voice steady but cold. Yes, I worked for the company. I helped manage purchasing orders, site coordination, payroll oversight. The prosecutor stood still, watching his every answer with the same stiffness you'd reserve for a gun about to jam. And, the prosecutor asked, did you at any time transfer large amounts of money into accounts not authorized by the company's financial department? Andre's eyes scanned the jury, not for sympathy, but understanding. I transferred funds, but I didn't route them to fake vendors. The click of a laptop was heard somewhere behind the defense table. Are you saying the documents submitted in this trial are false? I'm saying I followed orders. Everything was signed off. Signed off by who? I received verbal approval from Darren Pothust. At that moment, a whisper cut through the courtroom like a blade. Darren, seated 3 rows back, flinched so violently, a bailiff subtly adjusted his stance. Bate looked forward, expression unreadable, eyes sharp but still, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles matched the courtroom walls. You're accusing your brother-in-law of orchestrating the missing money? The prosecutor continued. Andre didn't blink. I'm saying he hated me, said I'd never be part of the family, and he made sure that if anything ever happened inside the books, I'd take the fall. Another wave of murmurs. The judge struck her gavel once. Calm returned, but Bates' chest now rose faster. Her jaw tensed. She never looked at Andre, but he saw her from the corner of his eye. She knew everything, he added bitterly, almost as an afterthought. Gasps again. I told her not to get involved. I asked her to step away. Why do you think she didn't? Because she wanted freedom. Because in her world, money means peace. And if stealing from her father brought her that peace, she convinced herself it was worth it. When he stepped down, he didn't look at her. He didn't even glance at the gallery. Just walked back to the defendant's table like the weight had slid off of him. But the real hammer hadn't dropped yet. Bate rose. They didn't even wait for a recess. The judge asked, "Do you wish to testify?" Bate nodded once. She took the stand in heels that echoed across the floor, every step rehearsed, deliberate. The kind of walk a woman uses when performance is survival. Where Andre was stiff, Bate was composed. Almost too much. Her voice was soft but clear, the kind of calm that comes when someone has waited too long to speak their version of the truth. They said I had access. That I used my father's password. That I created fake LLCs. She paused, the room leaned in. They were right. A crack in the silence. One juror choked on surprise. But they weren't complete. Explain, the prosecutor urged. Bate looked at Andre. No anger, no sorrow, just distance. When Andre came into my life, I thought I'd finally have something of my own. Not my father's rules, not Darren's shadow. My own person, my own beginning. She paused. He promised me everything. Dinners in Paris, a house outside of Naples, a private company that we'd run together. He told me it was survival, that we're not stealing, we're reclaiming from a man who controls everything. So he manipulated you? No, Bates said. He groomed me. That word dropped like a weight onto wet pavement. It didn't echo, it sank. He said if I didn't help him access the company's books, he'd tell everyone what I did in Belize. How I set up deals behind my dad's back, that I'd lose my daughter, my family, my future, that I'd be disowned, alone, branded guilty. Andre, at the defense table, whispered something to his lawyer, then went silent. So you helped him, under threat. I helped him because he made me believe I owed him, and I stayed quiet. Because the storm outside felt safer than the one he'd unleash if I didn't. When Bate descended the stand, she didn't cry. But her brother did, silently, shoulders shaking once. Then again, hidden behind sunglasses and pride. This wasn't just a fraud case. This was revenge disguised as romance, a marriage weaponized. A family imploding under the weight of secrets too deep to swim out of. And outside, the media had already branded them, the Bonnie and Clyde of South Florida. What they couldn't see, what no one could, was that the worst betrayal hadn't been delivered yet. That was still coming, and the person walking into court next would hit the case like a hurricane. She wasn't on the witness list, she wasn't even from this country, but what she brought with her shattered years of lies. It happened on the third day of trial. By then, everyone had started to exhale, as if the worst was over. As if the courtroom could finally begin sorting through the twisted story of forged LLCs, secret transfers, and shattered vows. But then the bailiff walked forward with something no one expected, a folded letter, sealed, hand-delivered. The judge raised an eyebrow after reading it. She whispered to the clerk, then lifted her head and asked in a tone that made even the wooden walls of the room feel colder. We have a motion submitted for a surprise witness. Records included. All parties will remain seated. Miss Kalinova, please step forward. No one moved. Until a woman stood up in the far back of the gallery, dressed in dark navy, her black coat wrapped tight around her waist. She walked slowly but with purpose, not nervous, not hesitant. Like someone who didn't come to speculate, she came to reveal. Bates' eyes narrowed slightly. Andre, his hand curled into a fist under the table. When she reached the stand, her accent curled around every word. My name is Yelena Kalinova. I'm a citizen of Ukraine. I live in Kiev. I met Andre 9 years ago. In Chisinau, Moldova. The courtroom, once heavy with tension, now felt paralyzed. Yelena slid a manila envelope to the court officer, who opened it to reveal several sheets of documents. Photocopies of passports. Records from the Moldovan Ministry of Internal Affairs. A scanned court summons dated 2016. Attached to it, one thing shook the room, an arrest warrant. Issued for a man named Andrei Kazhin, robbery, attempted fraud, and possession of false banking documents. Let the record reflect, the prosecutor said slowly, that this appears to be an entirely separate identity. yet matches the fingerprints submitted to U.S. immigration when Andrei Kastravit applied for his visa. Bate didn't move. The paper trail now had borders, Yelena continued. Andrei and I were in a relationship. He was a taxi driver, but he had contacts. Not good ones. He'd come home late, disappear for days, but he always had money. Big money. He told me it was from construction jobs. I believed him, her voice cracked. Until he asked me to help him open an account under my name. The courtroom sat full of breathless portraits, shock frozen across every row. She refused. He left, disappeared. A week later, police came knocking. He ran, abandoned his name, started forging a new one. They couldn't find him, but I could, because a year later I saw him again. Silence fell again, then she held up a printout. Bates' wedding photo, cut from a gossip blog circled in red. He changed his last name, dyed his hair, went to America, used the perfect cover. He married someone young, wealthy, and desperate to love a rebel. Bate finally stirred. That's enough, she said flatly, but Yelena pressed on. I contacted an American immigration officer, reported everything. But by then, he'd already gotten his green card. What proof do you have that Bate knew about your past? The defense countered. Yelena shifted uncomfortably, then opened her coat, reaching for her wallet. She handed the court another document. A hotel reservation in Miami, dated 1 year before Andre and Bates' reality TV wedding. And next to his name on the reservation, Cassie Andre and a second guest, Elizabeth P. She knew, Yelena said. They were in contact before the show, before the wedding. I believe they used the marriage storyline as a safety net. An alibi, so if anything from Moldova surfaced, they'd have TLC cameras in their corner. Whispers tried but failed to contain themselves behind cupped mouths and stiff posture. The judge banged her gavel once, twice. Andre's lawyer stood. We have no knowledge of these documents. Due diligence has not been verified. And still, Andre did not deny it. He didn't object. He didn't shake his head. He lowered it. Yelena didn't leave the courtroom right away. She sat back in the gallery, clutching the strap of her purse like it held the last pieces of her broken youth. Her eyes didn't follow Andre. They locked on Bate, who looked away first. That matters less than what happened after. Because discovery filings now had to stretch years back into Moldova. The Department of Homeland Security requested immediate documentation. And visa fraud became the next phrase whispered in the courtroom walls. The prosecution's job just got easier. Bates' defense, much harder. Because playing the victim while sitting next to someone carrying a second identity inside a stolen name made her less sympathetic by the second. Reporters waited like vultures on the courthouse steps. Headlines the next morning read, Who is Andrei Kastravit, and what is he hiding? Foreign fugitive or American husband? Bate Pothest married a ghost, now faces charges of her own. 3 photographs topped every article. Bates' courtroom scowl, Andrei's blank stare, and Yelena's haunting gaze as she held up the wedding photo where someone had drawn a red circle around a lie dressed in white. Truth doesn't knock twice. When it comes, it kicks in every door around it. The past had finally arrived. But the worst part, that ghost from Moldova wasn't the last surprise waiting to split this courtroom open. Something was coming next. And not even Yelena could predict it. She didn't flinch. Not when they said money laundering, not even when they said prison. Because what she wanted wasn't freedom, it was revenge. Bate took the stand again on the 5th day. But this time, there was no mask left to wear. Her heels clicked harder. Her eyes didn't search the room like they used to. They stayed locked forward, steady, almost serene. People expected tears, maybe apologies, a woman begging for leniency or claiming ignorance. Instead, she smiled. Not the sweet smile she wore on camera back during season 4. Not the soft, head tilted, polished grin her mother taught her to use when guests were over. This was a smile born from ashes. One that told the room she wasn't broken, she was satisfied. I didn't marry a thief, she said flatly. I married a mirror. The court shifted. Andre blinked for the first time in minutes. You all want a motive. Fine. I was tired of being a daughter who was only allowed to exist between lines. My father owned my time, my thoughts, my future. Every dollar I was handed came with strings so thick, I couldn't breathe. Her voice didn't shake, it sharpened. I didn't take his money because we were desperate. I took it to feel alive. And if Andre hadn't shown up in my life when he did, maybe I never would have had the spine. She looked at her husband, her mouth hardening around the words. But he thought I was weak. He thought I needed protecting. Truth is, I was using him as much as he thought he was using me. And the nursery? The prosecutor asked coldly. The cash under the crib? Bate nodded slightly, almost amused. because that's the place they'd never look. Not for someone like me. I'd already spent a lifetime being underestimated. Andre's fists tightened in his lap, but his mouth stayed closed. No one saw this version of Bate coming, the heiress who turned against the kingdom. The daughter who didn't deny her crimes, because in her world, they made a long overdue point. She didn't want forgiveness, she wanted fire. And now that the whole house was burning, she finally looked free. But someone else had been watching from behind the scenes, someone ready to take that freedom away forever. And he was minutes from being called to the stand. She didn't flinch. Not when they said money laundering, not even when they said prison. Because what she wanted wasn't freedom, it was revenge. Bate took the stand again on the fifth day. But this time, there was no mask left to wear. Her heels clicked harder. Her eyes didn't search the room like they used to. They stayed locked forward, steady, almost serene. People expected tears, maybe apologies, a woman begging for leniency or claiming ignorance. Instead, she smiled. Not the sweet smile she wore on camera back during season 4. Not the soft, head tilted, polished grin her mother taught her to use when guests were over. This was a smile born from ashes. One that told the room she wasn't broken, she was satisfied. I didn't marry a thief, she said flatly. I married a mirror. The court shifted. Andre blinked for the first time in minutes. You all want a motive. Fine. I was tired of being a daughter who was only allowed to exist between lines. My father owned my time, my thoughts, my future. Every dollar I was handed came with strings so thick, I couldn't breathe. Her voice didn't shake, it sharpened. I didn't take his money because we were desperate. I took it to feel alive. And if Andre hadn't shown up in my life when he did, maybe I never would have had the spine. She looked at her husband, her mouth hardening around the words. But he thought I was weak. He thought I needed protecting. Truth is, I was using him as much as he thought he was using me. And the nursery? The prosecutor asked coldly. The cash under the crib? Bate nodded slightly, almost amused. Because that's the place they'd never look. Not for someone like me. I'd already spent a lifetime being underestimated. Andre's fists tightened in his lap, but his mouth stayed closed. No one saw this version of Bate coming, the heiress who turned against the kingdom. The daughter who didn't deny her crimes, because in her world, they made a long overdue point. She didn't want forgiveness, she wanted fire. And now that the whole house was burning, she finally looked free. But someone else had been watching from behind the scenes, someone ready to take that freedom away forever. And he was minutes from being called to the stand. You never think the weakest link wears lipstick and carries designer heels. Until she brings it all down. The courtroom was still recovering from Bates' cold confession when they called the next witness. She wasn't dressed like the others, no suit, no nerves, dressed up as confidence. She wore a simple brown cardigan and black flats. Her hair was tied back, no makeup. Quiet, focused. The kind of woman people pass in hallways and never notice. But on this day, the most dangerous person in the room wasn't the defense or the prosecution. It was her. Her name was Ava Monroe, former assistant to Darren Pothust. Worked quietly in the back office of the construction company for 4 years. Payroll, HR memos, transaction trails, things nobody glamorous wanted to deal with. But Ava had one thing no one else did. A perfect memory. Bate didn't even glance up when Ava was sworn in. She sat bored, chewing the corner of her lip, as if this was just a waste of time. But that changed fast. When did you first notice something strange? The lawyer asked. Ava cleared her throat, her voice barely louder than a whisper, but every word cut deep. There were purchase orders I didn't recognize. Approval codes that came from upper management, but not with the usual formatting. One signature was off. How off? They used Darren's name, but not his initials. And the access tokens were from a secondary device. You traced the device? Ava nodded. It was linked to Bates' login. She had Darren's password. Probably memorized it from watching him type it in over the years. Stirring in the gallery. Bates' mother shook her head, whispering something to her sister. Darren looked down at his folded hands. And you verified this. There's video backup on the office security server. Our IT rotated backups every 90 days. What's on the tape? The prosecutor handed over a USB. The judge allowed it. The screen flickered on. Grainy footage from a nighttime security cam in the office. No timestamp, but the location was clear. Bate in a navy sweater, hair pulled back, sitting at Darren's desk. She tapped quickly at the keys, looking over her shoulder once, twice. She didn't think anyone would ever see it. But Ava had saved everything. Quietly, on a private server. Because when you're invisible in the building, you start to see everything. 2 minutes of footage, then black screen. The lights in the courtroom felt suddenly heavier, but Ava wasn't done. She reached into her file and pulled one more sheet, email correspondence between Bate and a man named Graham Dorsey. Bate froze. Graham wasn't new to law enforcement. A known real estate consultant in Florida, already under federal investigation for funneling illegal funds through bogus overseas property deals. Months ago, Graham went silent, but not before he left a paper trail. The email, printed, signed, and verified, showed Bate requesting his assistance to create layers between family-managed assets and private holdings. The language was vague, enough to dance around charges, but damning enough to trap her. Date 2 weeks before the first transfer of fraud money. Was there a meeting between Bate and Mr. Dorsey? The prosecutor asked. Yes, Ava replied. It wasn't on the books. But I saw them leave through the side gate after hours. She said it was a financial planner, but I'd seen his name on the news. Bates' lawyer leaned in to object, begging for hearsay, but the judge allowed it under discovery context. Across the room, Andre watched his wife like he was meeting a stranger. His own lawyer turned to whisper urgently, "Can we refute any of this?" No, it was the one syllable that sealed the entire moment. Because now, it wasn't just Andre who was falling under weight. It was Bate. She had outplayed her own pride, and her own assistant had been watching the whole time. They say a kingdom falls from the top. But sometimes, it's the quiet hands in the back office who light the first match. And one more is coming, because the last witness has arrived, and he isn't here to speak, he's here to confess. No applause, no relief. Only silence, and the sound of her father walking out of the courtroom without once looking back. It was the kind of morning where the air changed before anyone spoke. The final day. Everything hurtled toward this, months of hearings, evidence, betrayal, risk, confession. Closing arguments had left scars. Bates' team tried everything, emotional leverage, pulling at the jury's sympathy, even introducing a psychiatrist last minute to argue the grip Andre had on her psychological autonomy. It barely landed. Andre kept quiet most of the day, expression unreadable, hands clasped like he was holding secrets even now. When his attorney asked if he had anything else to say before the decision, he whispered only 3 words. I was loyal. The courtroom was packed now. Cameras angled. Reporters on standby. 5 networks live streaming the verdict with subtitles running cold across the screens. Bates' eyes darted from face to face. Her lipstick was red again, sharp, unfazed. But as the jury took their seats, her posture finally broke. One shoulder lowered. Her left foot tapped the floor without rhythm. She knew. The foreperson handed the verdict card to the bailiff with steady hands. The clerk unfolded the paper slowly, her voice flat. Count 1, guilty. Count 2, guilty. Count 3, guilty. Each word hit like stones skipped across a frozen pond, cracking everything underneath. Bate didn't cry, she barely blinked, only sat straighter, as if guilty meant power. But when count number 7 echoed down the hallway, and the judge confirmed her sentence was to be reviewed with a minimum of 15 years pending federal guidelines, something shifted. For the first time the entire trial, she looked truly alone. And then came Andre. Regarding Andre Castravet, the court announced, charges are dismissed due to insufficient U.S. jurisdiction, but based on the testimony presented, the court recommends immediate deportation pending federal immigration review. Andre didn't react. No smile, no protest. He just exhaled, small and slow, before the guards approached him. Bate turned to look at him as he stood, waiting for something, a glance, a bow of the head, a goodbye, but he never looked her way. She watched as the man who once saved her from her family's grip now walked right past her shackled wrists without a word. No closure, no recognition, as if their story had always been on separate pages. Her father stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, face hardened the way only fathers can when they warned you and you didn't listen. And when it was over, when the guards led her out down the side hallway and the murmurs grew louder behind, they said nothing to each other. No final eye contact. No whispers of love, just silence and footsteps. And the kind of ending no reality TV show ever truly captures. Because what aired was fake. But what fell apart in this room? That was real. Freedom wasn't the goal. Peace wasn't either. She didn't smile when they read the verdict. She smiled when she knew she hurt them all. 3 years later, the Florida courtroom is long forgotten by the news cycle. The headlines moved on to fresher scandals. But the fallout from what Bate and Andre did still hangs in the air, quiet, heavy, permanent. In Moldova, Andre walks past the same alleyways he used to avoid as a teenager. His passport is real now. His name, for the first time in years, is his, Kazan. No more aliases, no more secrets, but no family either. His mother died 2 winters ago. He didn't make it in time. His brothers won't return his calls. His name is tainted here too, even if the paperwork never followed him across borders. He works alone now, small hauling jobs, fixing broken plumbing, the American dream. It sucked him in, then spat him straight back into a city that moved on while he was trading dollars for doubt. He rents a room behind a bakery where no one asks questions. He hasn't seen his daughter since the sentencing. Back in Florida, Bates' sister now has custody. The courts ruled in favor of stability, routine, and distance from public disgrace. Bate didn't appeal, didn't even fight. She signed the transfer papers in under 5 minutes. The prison she's in is cold in the mornings and brutally hot by noon, but she never complains. She reads books no one thought she'd enjoy. She takes yoga classes, keeps a journal. Her makeup is long gone, but the sharpness in her voice still there. After over a year of silence, Bate finally submitted a handwritten letter to a podcast that had followed her case since the trial. It was never allowed to air, but the host read an excerpt on the final episode. She wrote, "I wasn't trying to escape. I was trying to prove I existed. I spent my whole life told I was lucky, a wealthy family, pretty face, a chance to be on TV. But being lucky feels like drowning when you don't control where the tide takes you. So I built a raft. Was it illegal? Dangerous? Maybe. But for once, I wasn't just someone's daughter, or wife, or puppet, I was chaos. And in those 17 months when the lie was working, I was finally breathing. Stop asking if I regret it. I don't." The screen fades to black as a tape begins playing her voice, captured from a recorded prison interview buried under legal blocks. She says only this: "Control was always someone else's, until I took it. If hurting them is the price I pay for that, I'll serve every second." Then silence, no background music, no answers, just a long, still moment. Then the whisper. "And I'd do it again. Tell me what you think. Were they both guilty? Or did someone get exactly what they wanted?" Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what justice looks like to you.